Welcome to The Explainer. I am so pumped you're tuning in. Today, we are unpacking an incredibly powerful set of ideas about how our mental operating systems actually build resilience and how that ultimately shapes the way we raise the next generation. We're going to be drawing on some brilliant insights from psychoanalyst Dr. Andrea Vermont and philosopher Mario Sergio Cortella to basically decode the nuts and bolts behind human behavior.
But before we dive into the heavy science, I want to start things off with a pretty provocative question. Are you friends with your child? I mean, it's a huge modern goal, right? Everybody wants to be their kid's best buddy. But today, we're going to challenge that assumption and explore why trying to be a friend first might actually be setting both of you up for failure. To really get a handle on our behaviors, our parenting, and our relationships, we've got to first understand the actual mechanics of our own biology and consciousness.
So, let's jump into section 1, the hardware and the software.
Okay, let's look at this brilliant metaphor from Dr. Andrea Vermont. She says we can basically look at human biology just like a computer. Think of the brain as the hardware. It's the physical, fixed, material stuff. Thanks to neurobiology, every single one of us essentially gets the exact same base computer out of the box. But the mind? Well, the mind is the software. It's this metaphysical, highly plastic space where we are actively installing or deleting our psychological apps.
And because the mind is plastic, you are absolutely not stuck with your original programming. Now, sure, our environment and epigenetics, they help write our initial software. But here is the most empowering part of all this. You literally have the power to delete the apps that are crashing your system. Limiting beliefs, toxic loops, playing the victim, you can just hit uninstall. We have this incredible inherent capability for massive change.
Which brings us to section 2, trauma versus drama. We really have to ask ourselves, what actually paralyzes us in life? Is it the thing that happens to us, or is it the story we tell ourselves about what happened? See, what's really fascinating here is how Dr. Vermont completely redefines our pain. She points out that a car crash, a difficult childhood, or even a profound loss, it only becomes a trauma if the emotion remains unprocessed. The event itself, that's just a fact. The trauma is the unelaborated, stuck emotion left behind.
And this ties just beautifully into amor fati, which is a philosophical concept from Nietzsche. Basically, it means accepting facts exactly as they happened and deciding how to walk forward, instead of acting like a victim. Dr. Vermont shared a deeply personal story about this exact idea. She tragically lost her sister, who passed away right in front of her on a Wednesday. It was absolutely devastating. But you know what? By the very next Monday, she was back in the studio working. Why? Because she actively chose to process the emotion, to practice amor fati, and embrace life, realizing that life only truly stops for the person who passed away.
We've got to contrast these two mindsets. Drama is self-pity, it's laziness, and it's getting paralyzed in this endless loop of excuses. Opportunity, on the other hand, is reworking that pain and using the difficulty as fuel. For example, when Dr. Vermont was in college, she lived in extreme poverty. Her parents couldn't support her education at all. But instead of making her lack of resources an excuse to quit, she survived by eating literally nothing but the seasonal fruit from her home, stuff like tangerines and bananas, for 5 whole years. There was no way she was going to let her circumstances become a paralyzing drama.
So let's see how this actually translates into the mechanics of change. You see, the brain naturally resists new paths because it's lazy and wants to save energy. Complaining is a super easy, well-established neural pathway, so to create real change, you have to use neuroplasticity. First, you need this brutal awareness of your flaws. Second, you have to practice opening entirely new pathways. And third, you rely on the Aristotelian method of grueling, highly conscious practice until that new behavior becomes a habit and eventually a virtue that just runs on autopilot.
All right, moving on to section 3, the power of the great no.
Let's scale this up from the individual to the family unit. The crucial point here is that the human brain doesn't actually finish forming until around age 21. Because of that, the biological and psychological presence of a guiding, rule-setting authority figure is absolutely non-negotiable. The psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan called this the great no. Without a figure of authority to step in and set boundaries, a child simply cannot achieve psychic balance.
And this brilliantly illustrates the modern parenting trap we see everywhere today. Modern parents are often just desperate to be loved by their kids. So they negotiate every little thing, and they're terrified of causing any frustration. Authoritative parents, on the other hand, prioritize being respected and they guide their children with firm limits. When parents try to be their kid's best friend out of this sense of neediness, they end up losing respect. And here's the kicker. Without respect, you absolutely cannot build true, structural love. Next up, Section 4,
the generation without desire.
This brings us right to the societal consequences of this modern parenting style. Let's look at why the youth of today often seem so disconnected and unmotivated. Dr. Vermont calls this lazy parent syndrome. Now look, we all know it is undeniably exhausting to raise kids. But when we use screens and tablets as digital pacifiers at the dinner table just because we're tired, we are robbing our children of a really crucial skill, learning how to cope with boredom and frustration. When there are no rules, no hierarchy, and just an excess of comfort, a child's development completely stalls out.
This idea is deeply rooted in psychology. Freud theorized that a lack of desire actually increases the death drive, which is basically this sort of apathy toward life. Think about it. What generates desire is lack. If there is no lack, there is no desire. So if you give a young child a king-sized bed, a premium smartphone, and literally limitless food delivery, there is zero lack. And without that lack, you unintentionally kill their ambition and their natural drive for life.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the love that educates. So how do we actually fix this? Well, we need to redefine what love looks like in practice, both at home and in society. And it all starts with alignment. Dr. Vermont shares this amazing anecdote from her time living in a convent as a nun. The nuns desperately needed a van for donations. They prayed and they prayed, but absolutely nothing happened. Eventually, the Mother Superior realized that one sister didn't actually agree with the intention for the van. It wasn't until they sat down, discussed it, aligned their intentions, and united as a front that the donation finally arrived. It's the exact same in parenting. If you and your partner aren't fully aligned, if a house is divided, your rules are not going to prosper.
We've got to move from empty affection to competent love. Drawing on the philosophies of Mario Sergio Cortella, Paulo Freire, and Pestalozzi, we learn that true love in education isn't just having good intentions or simply giving a child a hug. It is amorosidade competente, competent love. It means doing the hard, prepared work of shaping character, providing necessary authority, and setting the strict limits a human being actually needs to thrive.
Now, yes, raising kids and doing that hard work is grueling. It takes years and years of sweat, repetition, and endless patience. But you really have to embrace it. Because educating takes intense work for a few years, sure, but failing to educate, that takes work for a lifetime. If you put the effort in now, eventually that intense labor pays off. It becomes your peace of mind, and ultimately it becomes your legacy.
As we wrap up today's explainer, it is time for a little reflection on the software you are choosing to run in your own mind right this very second. You are the one holding the keyboard. You can uninstall the drama right now and start writing new, resilient code.
I want to leave you with Dr. Vermont's deeply personal final thought here. Don't give up on yourself. Look, the work of building resilience and raising the next generation is tough, but the results are entirely in your hands. So ask yourself this: what toxic app are you going to delete from your mind today so you can finally stop giving up on your own potential? Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer, and keep doing the hard work.